Welcome back to the Facebook Lives. We do these every Thursday at 8:30 PST. And today, if you've been tuning in to our Facebook Lives frequently or in the past couple of weeks, you'll see that we've done some things like Yarn 101, Needle 101. We've done some designer interviews. And today we have yet another designer interview. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Michele Lee Bernstein, also known as PDX Knitterati, and I design and teach in Portland, Oregon, and pretty much all over the world now on Zoom.
In the new world of Zoom.
Yes.
That's so exciting. Michele has been a longtime designer with us, and I think many of you might recognize her shawl from our brioche collection, and we'll talk about brioche a little bit further in, but it is one of our favorite patterns, and we're so excited to talk to you today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start the conversation. Oh, and for anybody joining us who is new to this, or just as a little refresher, if you have questions for Michele or I about anything, feel free to ask in the comments and we will answer them as we go. We will also try to answer questions after we're done being live, so ask away. And then we will be adding links as well to things, so you can find everything that we're talking about easily right there. So Michele, to start, let's talk about, I think every knitter has a knitter genesis story, like how you became a knitter. What is your version of this?
My favorite aunt taught me to knit when I was 14 years old. I was spending the summer with her down in California, and she loves to knit. So she took me to her knit shop and we got stuff. And my very first project was a sweater, knit in the round with cables up the front. What I learned from that experience is my aunt doesn't do gauge swatches, and so neither did I. And I had an enormous sweater that I really pretty much never wore until years later. I thought, I'm going to shrink that and then I can wear it. And so I did. And that's when I learned that knitting shrinks a lot more this way than it does this way. And I had a very short, very boxy sweater, and I couldn't get it over my head anymore. I wish I still had it because it would be such a great example of what not to do.
It would.
But
oh my goodness.
It was really great and it stuck.
And that's the important part, right? I think as long as you're happy with that first project, then you're hooked and you can keep doing more. I think a lot of people bail when they have a frustrating project at the first one. Actually, do you have any tips? So from that experience, do you have tips for people who are just getting started knitting for a project that's accessible, that will like make them feel really good at the offset so that they can continue to knit and find joy in it?
I think either a washcloth, which is really small, so it's over soon. The yards long garter stitch scarf is not interesting after the first 10 rows.
Agreed. That was mine.
Yes, and the other thing I really like for a first project is in the round a hat, just a plain hat. If someone can get you started, it can be all stockinette, so it has a rolled brim, but then you're just practicing those stitches around and around and around. And when you get tired of it, it's time to make the top, and someone needs to help you with the top.
Right. I think that's also a really great way for someone to get started and try to experiment on their own for a while and then come back and get the next set of instructions. So it's not trying to absorb everything at once.
Yes. Here's a knit, here's a purl, here's a undo this. No, that's too much all at once.
Right. And then, so you started knitting, and then how did you get started into pattern design? How long did it take you to kind of do that jump? And then what was the beginning like?
So I've always been someone who messes around with things. And even when I was in high school, just when I was sewing, I would say, oh, I like this dress, but I like this top and I like this skirt on it. And then just kind of Frankenstein things together. So I think that's the first thing where you start playing with things and modifying things. And then eventually coming into the, oh, well, here's something that I want to do from the very beginning. Here's an idea I have, and here's what I want to do to make it go. And so for me, designing really started happening when Ravelry came into being, because then I had a way to self-publish my designs. Because if nobody knows you, they're not going to automatically say, oh, let's put you in a book, or would you like to do a book? No, you need to start small. And Ravelry gave me that opportunity, and I'm really, really grateful for that.
I remember when Ravelry started too, and it was just such a huge game changer for the whole industry. And even just, so I started knitting right when Ravelry was doing the, like you had to sign up and then you got an invite eventually. And or Knitty also for me, that was a huge resource as a beginner knitter.
Yes, it just made everything so much more accessible.
Right. And I know, so you teach now very often, like that's something you're doing all the time. How are you finding that people find your classes, or and I know that you've transitioned to doing more online classes. What has that looked like?
So I've been teaching in person for probably a dozen years, and it started at Twisted, which was my local yarn shop. They had opened and been open for a little bit, and they
Mine
said,
too.
"Hey, would you like to teach?" And I thought, "Okay, I could try that. I haven't done that before." But I love teaching. I found out I loved it so much, and then I started signing up to teach at festivals. Oregon Flock and Fiber Festival is a big favorite. Sorry, they're not happening this year.
I know.
Pandemic issue. Um, and last year, Vogue invited me to teach for Vogue Knitting Live. Last year, things just kind of exploded as far as teaching went. So I wasn't designing as much last year. And that was a big jump for me. The shows were a lot bigger and they're fun too. And then this year, with things shutting down because of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
they pivoted and started doing online events. And I thought, well, I could try doing that. And so I taught a couple classes. My first one was free with just a bunch of people who were on my mailing list. And I said, I need to try this. Would you let me experiment on you? And I had a small group of people and it worked out okay. It's not my favorite way to teach. I'd rather teach in person, but it was okay. And then the more I do, the more comfortable I am. And I think the more classes that people take online, the more comfortable they get. It's never going to be the same as doing it in person, but for right now, it's pretty good. It's pivot and adapt.
Right, right. And I think it's also encouraging to hear that as well. I feel like I also learned knitting from a friend who was visiting for the summer, and being able to learn in person with somebody, but then she went home after that and I had to figure it out on my own. And now I wish that there had been a way for me to call her and maybe FaceTime or Zoom with her to get the next step. So like if I'm doing that basic hat you talked about as a beginner knitter, to get the decrease instructions from somebody. And I'm glad that that's a resource that's happening now. So I think there's a win and a lose for some of this. And I'm so excited for the day when we can all get back together and do everything in person again.
Yes, I think, eventually it'll be a mix of both because some people don't like to travel or can't travel. And so they'd still want an online experience. But then there are people who would like me to hold their knitting, and I would love to hold their knitting to figure out what's going on.
Right.
Right now, I'm reduced to, can you see this? And
Is this in focus?
Turn it around.
We actually
getting better at it.
Right. We actually have a couple of questions. Annette loves your sweater. Do you have the pattern for that?
This is not my pattern, but I love this pattern. It's called Love Note by Tin Can Knits. And this is the second one I knit. And I needed more things that I could wear while I'm teaching because, I only show from the waist.
Right.
So I knit a third one last week, and it's really, really fast because this is DK weight yarn and it's 2 skeins. I'm done.
Whoa.
So I have a pink one now, and I have a purple one with sleeves that is fingering weight and mohair held together, which is the other way they say to do it. So you can either make DK or pretend DK with 2 strands.
I am really loving fingering weight with a mohair together lately. I think like I'm converting the entire office to this whole new process. I love it. I'm so glad this has become a thing now.
Yes. The thing is finding which 2 yarns go together. I had a start and a stop and a start and a stop and start and a stop. And it ended up being 2 yarns from my stash that my purple Love Note, which is in a drawer behind me.
That's excellent. And we also have Ellen who's chiming in, and she says that she took your swatching class and loved it. So it's so nice to see everybody online. Another question that I have for you is, as a designer and as a knitter, do you have, mostly as a designer, do you have a technique that you keep coming back to over and over again, or something that you're really into right now? Like what's a technique that's really speaking to you and you're exploring?
It's brioche.
Yeah.
So in 2017, I took a brioche class and it didn't stick. There were, as you were saying, too many things all at once. So it was flat, so it was the sliding back and forth thing. And then we had increases and decreases at the same time and how to deal with selvage edges. And it was too much for me to remember because at the same time that weekend, I tried to learn double knitting. I took a class in that too. Way too much information. So I came home and I didn't know anything anymore. And a couple months later, I decided I'm going to try that again. And I poked around on the internet thinking, what is the easiest way to learn brioche? And I thought, well, if you knit it in the round, then you don't have to think, do I have to turn this to the front or the back or slide or turn or whatever? And in two colors, you can tell what's happening in your knitting because your stitch and the yarn over that goes over it are always two different colors. So figured out how to knit it. And then I wrote this little pattern. It's called Petite Brioche. It's free on my website, pdxknitterati.com. And there are videos that are clickable from the pattern to show you how to do it either if you're a thrower or if you knit continental. And this is kind of like my gateway into brioche. So then the next thing I learned with brioche are increases and decreases, and that's what makes the really pretty patterning. And, you know, there's always something more to learn. So after that, it was, well, what about syncopated brioche, where you've got, let me see if I can pull a thing.
Yes.
So the front and the back, but you can tell that there's a change going on within the row because, you know, you're going along and it's the white or it's the not white, and you can make that happen. That's syncopated brioche. So I did a syncopated brioche pattern for Yarn Over Knits, from Knit Picks, the book. It's the window pane scarf. And that was actually my first syncopated brioche pattern, my first jump into it at all, because I wanted to do something with it. And it's in your book.
I love how brioche looks with color changing yarn. I think that adds just like yet another dimension to it. So I loved that scarf in, I believe it's chroma. Is that right?
It is. It's
Yeah.
chroma worsted in Pegasus and natural. That appears to be my favorite combination because I have a lot of stuff in Pegasus and natural and chroma worsted.
Right. Oh, and then let me just take, before we jump into more patterns and more yarn, let me take a minute to remind everybody. So if you're just joining us, we're talking with Michele Lee Bernstein, who is an amazing designer and also a longtime teacher. So if you have somebody, or if you have questions for her based on designs, but being a designer or teaching, feel free to chime in. And if you're looking for any of our past live videos, they're in the video tab on Facebook or on, yeah, that's where they are. So we have some questions coming in from people. So do you have, I'm betting that you get this question semi-often. Do you have advice for an aspiring designer? So someone who's just looking to dip their toe in and not sure where to start.
So start with what you love. What makes your heart sing? Is it yarn? Is it a special technique? Is it color? What's your thing? And you can probably tell what your thing is by what it is you stash. Some people stash yarn. I stash books because I love techniques. And then I take those techniques and put them into something, and that little technique makes that item sing. For me, I like to design accessories because 3 favorite words, gauge not critical, very helpful for me. And also I have pretty much a 2 skein attention span, so I love designing accessories. And a classic accessory like a hat or a cowl or fingerless mitts, those are great small canvases to experiment on. And I have to say, if you want to dip your toe into designing, submit your design to Knit Picks when they put out a call. You can get on a list to answer calls for designs, and they'll do your test knitting for you and your tech editing for you. So that helps you along, because at the very beginning, if you have to do everything, you have to wear all the hats. You're the designer, you have to edit, or actually you should pay someone to edit for you. And for myself, I'm a photographer for my independent designs, and I do the layout. So there are a lot of things that Knit Picks will do for you. Get chosen to do that.
Right. And there are a lot of publications that will also do that, provide that service. A lot of the yarn companies, when they work with other designers that are not just an in-house team, they're always looking for new patterns, and they have calls for submissions. You can find them on Ravelry usually. And for us, they're on our website or Ravelry as well. We really love working with new designers, and we really love working with new to us designers. And we do take care of a lot of the process. And I do think that helps some people who are new to designing and don't necessarily know about tech editing kind of get in the flow for a more streamlined process because we've been doing it for a long time. And now that we're talking about it, I'm wondering if maybe we put out a guide to getting started as well for designers, because we've been doing this for so long, and you have also been doing this for so long, that I think it's easy for the team to forget that it's hard to figure out how to get started. So I like
Yes.
that idea.
You do a really good job with your email list. We designers can get on your email list to be notified every time there's a call.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really good description of what you're looking for and what the deadlines are and what you have to do. And you always send a mood board so we can look at it and look at colors and textures and get a good idea of what you're looking for. And that's really helpful.
Well, I'm glad. I don't think we ever really talk with the designers about, we just send the thing out into the world and expect things to come back, and they always do. But I don't
Yes.
think I've ever asked anybody, like, how is that for you?
Good.
Good. So you've been in quite a few of our publications, and you're both sides now brioche shawl. Can we talk about that, since we were talking about brioche? And
I have them sitting right here. When you talk about submitting a design, this is the very first design I ever submitted that I already had the whole thing done. And I sent pictures of the finished object because I had fallen so deeply into brioche. I was playing around with brioche, and I had this shawl that I wanted to do, and I worked it out. And then your call came before I published it, and I thought, I'm going to submit it over here. And I hardly have to work at all, except for the writing and everything else. But the thinking part of it was done. And I love it. I have a small version also. Let me back up a little. So here's the 2 skein version. And, I should show you both sides, right? So here's this is technically the right side, I think. And
I love it.
This is the back. And the magic thing about this particular stitch pattern, the branches go down on one side and up on the other.
Oh, I didn't realize.
It's magic, right?
Whoa.
This is the 4 skein version. I'm going to show you the technical right side first.
Mm-hmm.
And here is the technical wrong side, but both sides look great. So I called it Both Sides Now, and I stuck an earworm into Stacy's ear. Stacy, who works for Knit Picks. I said, I'm naming this Both Sides Now. She said, oh no, Joni Mitchell's hit playing in my head. And I said, I'm hearing Judy Collins. So now you can hear it all day too.
That's excellent. That's wonderful. Somebody's asking, Karen's asking, do you tend to design for yourself, or do you have a particular person in mind, or maybe a story in mind?
I tend to design based on techniques. So there's a technique that I've learned, and I just want to kind of run it out to all the different parameters I can. So here's entrelac. Oh, okay, I'm going to do a cowl. Oh, I could put it on a sock cuff. I could put it on this, I could put it on that. We could do it in the round, we could do it flat. And so for me, it's more like a game of playing with techniques and objects, as opposed to, I really want to wear a whatever.
I like it. That's interesting.
So a shawl is a great canvas for lots of different stitches. And cowls and hats the same, but shawl is a nice big canvas.
Right. And I like that it's not gauge specific. So you have that freedom to play around with it, right? Rather than being so concerned about fitting properly in a certain spot.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Do you have particular yarns that you love to work with in terms of maybe what you're working on most recently? We were talking about chroma earlier. I noticed that your feed is very colorful on Ravelry compared to some other designers. So you play with color a lot more often than I've seen.
But it's not true. I am very, very tentative about color. And so mostly when I do color, you'll see gradations of the same color. I'm really good at monotone. And the Both Sides Now shawls, you notice they were blue and blue related or purple and purple related. What I love about color is when I get a gradient that someone else has designed. So that Pegasus chroma worsted Pegasus. Someone has done all the work of figuring out the color and making it look good together. And I can tell just by looking at the picture that I am going to love this. So I look like I'm the smartest color person in the world, but I'm not. I'm using somebody else's color.
I do think that's the best part of using like a hand painted yarn or a long color changing yarn is that it does so much of the heavy lifting for you. So you don't have to pick out the 5 colors that are in the project. It's already done.
Yes, I picked colors for my parents' house one year and they looked great on the little paint chips. And when it was up on the house, it looked like a bad peach milkshake with green accents. It was terrible when it was big. So I'm really happy when someone else does my color picking for me.
Right. Oh, that's so much fun. I didn't realize it just, I feel like I see so many designers who are going very neutral right now, like the rust orange, tans, grays, blacks, whites. And I think seeing your Ravelry page all together, it just made me realize that I think you gravitate towards brighter colors, but maybe you're right, like not a lot of color play.
Yes.
Like oh, interesting. Do you have specific tools that you come back to time and again, or that you've realized that are like your tried and true tools?
So I'm pretty minimalist as far as tools go. And I love stitch markers, pretty plain ones, just so they can move along easily in my knitting. And my favorite tool, I'm gonna pick my knitting up and find it, is this little barrel counter, which counts my rows and also is a stitch marker that hangs on my knitting. I mentioned it in a Vogue Knit Live class last week, and the person who was monitoring my class for me, the volunteer, she went out and bought 4 of them, and they showed up in her Instagram feed because she had never thought of it. But it does 2 things, and it takes care of it for me. And so I find them very helpful. The other thing that I love, which doesn't hang out in my knitting, but your blocking wires and blocking pins are a mainstay of my work because my job's not done until the blocking is done.
Right.
You can make a thing, but it's really not done until you've finished it in whatever way it needs to be finished. And since I do a lot of shawls, I'm using those blocking wires a lot.
Right. And I realized that before I started working here, I had just needles and yarn and that was it. But then over time, I've come to really appreciate some of the tools I thought were like extras or fancy, like even ball winders and swifts, like being able to wind your yarn quickly. And I didn't realize there's a beauty to having the right tool for the right project. And I think I am also a minimalist, but I think there's some things that are just like, you have to have them to make your life so much easier and better and your projects better.
Yes. And my favorite aunt who taught me to knit, when she came up to visit, we went to Twisted. She said, I want to buy you a winder and swift. You're a professional and now you need professional tools. And so we did get a ball winder and swift, but I have upgraded that swift since then. And now I have your wooden swift, which is really, really great. It's heavy duty. It's not rickety feeling. And being able to wind your own yarn instead of having a shop do it for you, that gives you a chance to know as you're winding it. I let it run through my hand. Is there a knot somewhere in there? And, oh, what am I going to do about that? Usually there's no knot, but if there is one, I'd like to know, especially if I'm using a gradient yarn, because that will change what's going on. Did they change within the gradient or did they just change it? And here's another color. I'm not naming any names. It's not you guys.
Oh, it happens. It happens. And we always follow up with our mail and say, hey guys,
don't do
remember that thing. Try not to do that. Or if you do, fix it nicely. And
yes.
Yeah.
Got to remain in the color.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to wind your own yarn and feel it and see it and say, oh, wait, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gives you a chance to kind of oversee the whole length of what you're going to be working with and making sure everything's in order. And also just get a sense of it. Because I think that's so much of the fiber, at least for me, is getting a feel for how it's going to behave. And again, so if anyone has any final questions, we're wrapping up, I think, a little bit. So if you've got questions for Michele, I know we've got a few in the queue here. One, Paulette is asking, do you have any tips for attaching pieces together? She's talking about specifically, I think, a sampler blanket. So seaming, I guess, is her question. So I know that's a tricky one.
It depends. And I don't have a lot of things that I put together. Again, accessories. But I have crocheted things together with slip
Mhm.
stitch crochet. That works pretty well for blankets. Or mattress stitch also works really well.
Mhm.
And those are my best tips for you on that.
Yeah, I think for me it might be worth just especially if it's a sampler blanket. I bet you can try seaming it a couple of different ways and then just ripping it out if it doesn't work. So just doing one block. So trying a couple of techniques, and there's a lot of really great resources on YouTube for how different seaming techniques. So I would just try them all out and see which works best for the project you're working on. Because if it's garter stitch or stockinette or something else, it's different every time. Also making sure your pieces are the same size, especially if it's a sampler
Yes.
blanket. Maybe block them first. That's
Yes, you
usually what
can
I
block
do.
them bigger, but you can't block them smaller. So you want to block them to the size of the biggest one.
Yeah, exactly. Make them all match up. And then we have Anne is asking, how much time do you spend knitting on a daily basis? I think a lot of knitters get this question too.
I do, and it can vary
Mhm.
anywhere from none to 4 hours. So it just
Right.
depends on what I'm
Yeah.
working on. Can I show you my newest thing that I'm so
Yes,
excited about?
please.
It's coming.
I forgot about it. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's coming out in July, and it's this shawl right here, and it's called Half the Knit Sky. It's based on a time-lapse photo of the knit sky where you get those star trails because of the long exposure. And
Right.
it it just it makes my heart sing. So it's with my test knitters now, and it should be done by the end of the month. And then
I
it's already tech edited and ready to roll as soon as that happens. And I am knitting another version in the same yarn that I knit both sides now in. So this is Hawthorn. And I'm going to just hold that up closer. You see we've got the star trails, and we've got some stars and some tiny stars. And it's a
oh, I
really
love it.
relaxing knit. You only use one color per row because those stripes are created with a little slip stitch, which
Mhm.
might be new to you, but it's super simple. And it's a really relaxing knit. You figure out what's going to happen on this row, and off you go.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I love the story behind it. I didn't realize my husband does a lot of night star photography, and I love how they always come out and they're just gorgeous. Oh, now I want to make that. I like the story behind it even more than the project.
And now I want to see his pictures.
I know. Yeah, there's some great spots in Oregon where we both are that you can go out and photograph the night sky. So like Crater Lake is a beautiful spot to go do that. That's fun. I love it. I really appreciate we usually pick patterns when we're picking patterns for a collection. We pick it based on what it looks like and the yarn you're choosing, and if we can get a feel for like how thought out the thing is, so it's not so much of a gamble. So we know like, oh, you've thought about everything, and like the edges are good, and we trust that this will come out right. But I feel like I'm always surprised at the story that the designer has about the piece that we see in the final collection. So we get that, I see that later, almost when the book is published, and I say, oh, there's so much more going on here and it makes me appreciate it even more. I love the design to begin with, but now there's a backstory that's charming as well.
Yes, you want to knit this.
Yes,
Can I put in a plug for my
yes,
newsletter? There's a
always,
link
please.
somewhere here,
Mhm.
and newsletter subscribers get news from me and tips and tutorials, and always a discount on my independent releases. And so that's coming out soon. If you're interested in that shawl, you should sign up for the newsletter. There is a link somewhere that will be provided. And then my blog, I blog
Uh-huh.
about knitting, and I used to blog about travel, but that's not happening much, and food, and a little bit about music.
Mhm.
And there's a tutorials page with a whole bunch of tutorials, both print and also videos. And since this whole pandemic started, I am upping my game on equipment and tutorials, and I have more ways to make beautiful tutorials and get my ring light and the cameras and everything. So check out my tutorials. They start out, 10 years ago, pretty rudimentary, and they're getting a whole lot better. The techniques are always good. It's just the presentation. The
Right.
presentation has improved a lot.
Oh, that's excellent news. And then where can people find your Vogue Knitting Live classes? Do they just sign up through their website?
Yes. And so you want to sign up at vogueknittinglive.com, I think, for their email. And when the email comes out, you want to jump on it pretty quickly if you want to get into one of these virtual events, because class sizes are limited. And my classes sell out within a couple hours or a day. And so you want
Really?
to jump on your email. Mostly I'm
Wow.
teaching brioche and then a
Mhm.
smattering of other things. So we always keep mixing in other classes. Take this one out, put this one in. But the brioche classes seem to be a mainstay, and I love brioche, and I think you will too.
Well, excellent. Thank you for joining me this week, Michele. It's been a delight talking to you.
It's been so nice talking to you too.
Yeah. I'm going to give a little rundown of all the things that we have available to our viewers. So if you are looking for past broadcasts that we do every Thursday morning at 8:30, you can find them on our Facebook page in the little TV section. We are getting them onto our website very soon, but you can also find us on YouTube. So past broadcasts will also be on there on our YouTube channel. If you're looking for inspiration to keep you going, we have Instagram and Facebook. We have our Facebook group, Together We Knit, where you can find a whole community of knitters who are very busy chatting. And we love eavesdropping and answering questions when we can, but it's mostly a bunch of just really passionate knitters and crocheters getting together and sharing projects, which we really love to see. And yeah, so we'll see you, I guess, next week at 8:30. And in the meantime, happy knitting always. All right. Well, thank you, Michele. It's been wonderful
Thank
talking to
you.
you.
It's been really fun talking to you too. Thank you.